Hello, this is Mark Taylor. I wanted to wish you a happy new year for 2018. I know we're currently in our music and the art season of season 4, but I wanted to start the new year with a positive message, really. I interviewed Lisa Avery, who's part of the UK arm now of Growing with Gratitude. I just think it's really important that before we start teaching our children anything about any particular subject, all the tools they need in order to survive and to become part of the workforce, it's a really important thing for them to know how to be the best human they can be and to find their talents and to find what it's like to be their best person. And you'll remember back in January 2017, I interviewed Ash Manuel, who set up Growing with Gratitude in Australia. And Lisa's now in charge of the UK arm of this, and so I wanted to give you the opportunity to really see what they're doing, how it's growing, and what's involved, so that in very simple steps you can get gratitude and mindfulness and general well-being embedded in your school, which is just such an important part for the survival and learning of every single child. So this is how we're going to start our 2018, with a really positive look at how we can really make well-being and support our children to be the best they possibly can. Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast, the place where we share creative and inspiring learning in our schools. Season 4, Episode 55. Hello and welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast with me, Mark Taylor. Today I'm joined by Lisa Avery, who is the UK Operations Manager of Growing with Gratitude. And you'll remember back in Episode 7, which was all the way back in January of this year, I chatted to Ash Manuel. He's the founder and the creator of Growing with Gratitude. And I was so excited to hear that actually they're now expanding and having someone that's dedicated to do everything within the UK. So welcome, Lisa, and I'm really pleased you're able to be on with us.
Oh, thank you, Mark. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. So can you just start off, give us a little bit of background about yourself and also how you became involved with Growing with Gratitude?
Sure, absolutely. And so my background really is in education. I started out in languages and language teaching. So I've lived in France and then later in Spain. And I've been here in Spain for like the last 13 years now, where I've been working in a range of primary schools, secondary schools. And later I got involved with a lot of different companies, local and multinational. And that really takes me to where I am now, in the sense that one of the institutions I was involved with was the School of Psychologists here in Barcelona, and I got involved with the organization of the International Congress of Coaching Psychology. And I mean, I'd always had a real interest in psychology. It was something that I'd been fascinated by and I'd always read a lot about. But at that moment, I really did get extremely excited and passionate and enthusiastic when I learned just, wow, what a transformative power it could have on people's lives. And so through that involvement, I looked into getting some training in psychology, which was where I came across the University of East London, and they were offering a 3-year master's degree in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology. And it was one of those moments, Mark, where it just seemed like everything came together. You know, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and this is what I feel hugely, hugely passionate about. And since then, I really haven't looked back. So that was sort of 3 years ago. And then in the last year, I started to speak to Ashley. He sort of found me via LinkedIn, and we got this dialogue going. And I was so excited by his project, you know, the idea of building and protecting kids' mental health, that it was something that I instantly got involved with. And so we're just launching now in the UK. Ashley's been going for a good 3 years over in Australia, and we're looking to really expand internationally to the rest of the world.
That's really great to hear. And so can you just give us a bit of background into what Growing with Gratitude is? Because, I mean, those that haven't heard my interview with Ash back on episode 7, just to give them a little bit of a taste of what it
Sure.
actually involves.
Sure, sure. So, Growing with Gratitude is a positive psychology program that we take to primary schools from the age of like 5 to 11. And what we focus on in Growing with Gratitude is cultivating a sense of gratitude, empathy, kindness, the growth mindset, resilience, all the psychological and emotional skills that children really need to thrive, to flourish, to be at their physical, psychological, and emotional best. And the way in which we do this is through this in-school program. And the program consists of, for each year group, we have 10 1 hour long classes. And then from the classes, we have some what we call the habits of happiness wheel. And so once the children have actually learnt the theory behind the happiness, we have a the weekly opportunity to practice via short habits. So for example, we'll have like a 5 minute activity that's 2 or 3 times a week. Because the idea is learning the theory is perfect. That's really great. But all of these are habits which have to be implemented on a regular basis to get the maximum psychological and emotional benefit. So yes, so it's a 10 hour long program for each year group, but with habits to be practiced on a regular basis. And teachers can choose to either do that in 10 consecutive weeks or else to space it out over the academic year. So it's up to them.
I see. And so, is it the teachers that are actually going to deliver this, or because
Yes.
I've seen Ash going into schools in Australia, and I wasn't quite sure whether that's complementing what's already going on and getting the whole project
Sure.
going, or whether it's an integral part of what's offered.
Sure, sure. Well, actually, what Ash is really doing is sort of like raising awareness as to what we're doing. So, for that reason, he is going in, he is conducting the workshops to teachers, to students. And that is something that we're willing to offer in the UK, and we'd be excited to do in the UK too. But in actual fact, our program is online and it's fully resourced. And that means that it's very easy for teachers, even teachers who don't have any training whatsoever in positive psychology, because everything is actually there on online in our program. And so teachers can very easily, read about the theory behind that because we have all the information there, and we have all the it's very easy and simple and straightforward. So much of what we're doing here, it's very straightforward and it seems very logical, yet it's something that doesn't exist. It's so simple, yet once implemented has very profound effects. So the teachers themselves, yeah, Mark, without any training in this, can very easily begin to implement this and see real results, and real differences because of this in the students, and in the interaction between students and teachers. And that, of course, extends to the whole school environment. So it's very simple, it's very easy to implement, yet it's something which has a real profound impact. That's what we found in Australia anyway.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's the key, is the fact that, one, it's the regularity of everything, and it being in their awareness, and that there's lots of talk here in the UK, especially about well-being and all of that kind of thing. But it's knowing what that is. Take the buzzword away, and it's what does that actually look like? How can you actually implement that? And I think that's what this program really helps with, doesn't it? It really gets you
yeah,
to understand what it is and the actual actionable tips that and exercises that you can
absolutely.
do.
Absolutely, absolutely, Mark. You're totally right. It's defining what it means, to be a well-rounded, balanced person. And I think, there's a real discrepancy when you speak to teachers and parents and you ask them what they'd want for their children in the future. They say happiness, well-being, health. And then you ask, well, what are we actually teaching in schools? Well, we're teaching achievement, we're teaching conformity. And it's trying really to bridge that discrepancy between that which we're actually doing and that which we actually, want for the future generations. And I think that's what it's about too. It's creating this dialogue. It's giving children the language to express their emotions, to express their needs. And I think, the younger we begin, the younger age groups we begin doing this, the more likely it is that we're going to prevent mental health problems. I don't know if your listeners are aware, but 1 in 10 children has a diagnosable mental illness in the UK. And in theory, half of these conditions can actually begin before the age of 14. So the fact that the government now, they're implementing a system in which they're going to train, I think it is 3,000 members of staff in secondary schools within the next 3 years to be aware of mental illnesses and these things. Well, for us, it's just a bit too late, you know. If half of mental illnesses begin before the age of 14, shouldn't we be trying to intervene before that age? And that is in part what we're about. You know, we're trying to take proactive steps and measures so as to cultivate maximum well-being, you know, so as to prevent these kind of future incidents in people.
And I think it's that understanding which is the most important thing, because what we
Yeah.
do know is that if you see a child around, if you go into a school playground, the sort of the people in reception and nursery and sort of year one, they're running around without a care in the world. It's all about play. Even a lot of their lessons to begin with are sort of play based, and they're thriving. And you can just see. You can just see it diminishing as they go up through the school year, and then you have your kind of, wow days, which kind of are meant to be inspiring. But I just think a lot of just the repetition of all the constant academic stuff and the stress
Yeah.
and all of that is just chipping
Yeah.
away at what they
Yeah.
naturally have, and a lot of it is about just what I like about this program is it seems to reinforce what the children will already know. They don't need to learn about
Yes.
being kind and empathizing with
No.
people, because it's what they have. It's just
Yeah.
letting them know that that's what they know already. They need to keep doing, and I
Yeah.
think looking at
Yeah.
it that way is a much more positive attitude.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I couldn't agree more. I think this is something very innate, but unfortunately, we tend to have this stripped away from us at a young age with too much focus on achievement, you know. And I mean, Martin Seligman, the sort of godfather of positive psychology, he has this formula for well-being, which is the acronym PERMA, which stands for positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and finally achievement. And I think our school system focuses so much on achievement, but to the detriment, you know, of the other elements of well-being, which are equally important. And those, you know, are things that we really try to focus on and highlight, just so that everything's in balance. You know, it's not about putting more weight on happiness. It's about trying to create a well-rounded human being who's going to thrive in every aspect of life, achievement being one of them. You know, and contrary to what people used to say, you know, teaching happiness and well-being is not detrimental to achievement. Quite the contrary. You know, happier students do better in schools, and that's been proved time and time and time again. And the great thing about happiness and resilience and all the things that we try to implement, they are very much teachable habits, and habits which can be built upon over time. And I think as well, Mark, you brought something very interesting up there, talking about the repetition in schools. What we strive for with Growing Gratitude, it's to create a sense of variety around this kind of teaching, because there's something in positive psychology called hedonic adaptation. I don't know whether you and your listeners will have heard of it. But the idea being, you know, that we get used to everything very quickly, be it something positive or something negative. So the fact is, we need constant variety so as not to get used to and just take things for granted. And habits like happiness, if you use them too much, you know, these exercises, they can become, you know, meaningless really and not really work so well. So we strive for variety, and I think that's sort of reflected in our program. We keep it very varied, you know, very exciting, and that's great for everyone involved.
Brilliant. And can you just give us sort of an example of what some of these exercises and programs would actually look like if you were going to be having it in your school?
Sure. So, I mean, we have a lot of different exercises sort of centered around gratitude, empathy, kindness. For example, one activity may be where children have a blank post-it note and they stick it to their back, and they have to walk around the classroom, and other children will write nice things about them on their back. So a compliment, for example. And so this is all in secret. So, you know, it creates a bit of an atmosphere going
Sure.
around the classroom. And so then later, you know, in sort of 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, that we'll have children sit down in small groups and take off the post-it from their back and hand their post-it to another child, so that then they'll start to share the compliments in small groups. And what's nice about this is we don't just stop there. So it's not a case of just the child hearing nice things about themselves. We talk about, you know, what it feels like to hear a compliment, what it feels like to give a compliment, what it does to the relationship between those people who are giving and receiving compliments, you know. So we're talking about kindness, we're talking about empathy, we're talking about this emotional understanding, and we're talking about the social glue that this really sort of creates, how this kind of interaction bonds people together. So, this is something that's good for the self-esteem of the individual, but also, it's creating those relationships. And I mean, positive relationships have been found to be a key to well-being. And I think oftentimes in school, we have a problem with bullying, we have a bad atmosphere in the classroom. So, I mean, it's not just about the individual, but it's about how the individual interacts with the rest of the students. And kindness, I think it's one of our pillars, and it's something, that we would focus on here. So that, that could be an example with kindness. Then for example, we might go on a mindfulness walk whereby, the kids they're taken out of the school with teachers, with helpers, and they're going on a walk, and they're going to be taking in, the sights, the sounds, the smells. They're going to, be walking in silence, and they're going to be really appreciative and really aware of what's going on. And then they're going to come back into the classroom, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to dissect that. And what we're really doing here, we're becoming aware of our own thoughts, our own feelings, and most importantly, we're becoming aware of the power that we have at any given moment to take a few seconds between our thought and how we interpret our thought, because between those thoughts and those reactions, there lie a few sort of critical seconds in which we can choose how we respond to that stimulus. So I mean, we go about this in all kinds of different ways, really. There are plenty more examples, but basically it's these habits of gratitude, empathy, kindness, growth mindset, resilience that really start to strengthen, as I said before, to build and protect the kids' mental health.
And what I like about that is the fact that, like you say, it's not taking up. We need to spend a whole day and then forget about it. It's doing it regularly. The thing that just struck me there is it doesn't happen so much in my daughter's school anymore because they've got a minibus, but they used to have to walk from the school up to the secondary school to have their swimming lessons. And I just thought, actually, it's those sorts of times which actually they all felt a little bit of a burden because they have to do it. But if you're in that mindset, if you've already had that conversation about, what do you notice on the way up, what do you see, what do you smell, all those kind of things, it just brings all of that time which is already accountable for in the school, because we know schools are, really struggling for time and having to accommodate everything. But it's including just a way of being within what you're already doing, and that's probably the most important takeaway from that point of view.
Absolutely, Mark. I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is something that very much is very easy to implement into an already sort of busy, overscheduled school timetable. And I think that the fact is that, the ability to be mindful, the ability to embody these qualities that we're trying to instill into young people, it really adds so much value to the times in which, kids are sitting down, they're focused, they're concentrated. A lot of schools now, I think, are starting to use meditation as a way to really calm and help focus students. And the power of it in study after study, it's absolutely undeniable. And I think it's very hard to ignore that. So I think for a little time that may seem, a little bit overstretched in an already hectic timetable, a little time taken out of that, wow, I think that it's a really powerful investment, for students' concentration, for students' well-being, and just for the general sort of happiness of the whole class and whole school environment. I absolutely think it's a very small investment for a real reward, the reward that you can reap.
Indeed. And for those people who did listen to the interview I did with Ash, can you take us a little bit through the journey that's happened sort of since January? Because I know when I spoke to him, they were having some research done from a university in Australia, and I know they've also been given some money and grants within various sporting organisations as well. So it sounds like it's really getting some momentum over there.
Absolutely, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. It's taking off nicely over there. I mean, they've actually been awarded 450,000 Australian dollars from the South Australian government, which is allowing Ash, to do all this work in schools to raise awareness for what we're about. The study from the University of South Australia, it's not quite complete yet, but the initial findings, they're very, very, very positive. So whilst I can't divulge too much of that information until it actually formally comes out. What I can say is that on a qualitative level, reports from students themselves, from teachers, from parents have been extremely positive in terms of well-being of the youngsters. So I mean that's all very exciting, and that is giving us the momentum, to try to take this to the rest of the world. The UK sort of being first in line there, and the fact that we're actually online, the fact that we're online, the fact that we're able to be accessed very easily means that we're actually present. Ash told me in 44 different countries already. So 44 different countries are already accessing our program because we have some free resources there, and so that's great. That's 44 countries where we're actually being found. So
That's great because I mean, Education on Fire is listened to in over 50 countries around the world now,
wow.
which is incredible. So it's really great to know that while we often talk about the UK and some of these things I'm also really keen to make sure that anything which can be accessed around the world, which is relevant
Yeah,
to anybody, that's when we're just talking about what's the most important thing for our children rather than just part of
sure,
the curriculum and that sort of thing, it really does help
sure.
them in order to be able to do that. So that's a really
Yeah,
great thing to know that no matter where
yeah,
you're listening, you can actually get access to these things. So where should they go to try and find some of these resources? Where's the best sort of website to get
sure.
that?
And so you can find our website at www.growingwithgratitude.com.au for Australia. If you go to this website, we actually have the UK page too, but it's easier to go for it to growingwithgratitude.com.au. And from that website, you can sign up for some free resources. If you're a school and you're interested in having a free trial, then we happily give a free trial for a 2-week period, and we're very excited to do that. And of course, just to contact either Ash or I for any more information, because there's so much more to say. Yet at the same time, it's all very simple and straightforward to implement into the school. And I think the results are profound. So yeah.
That's really, it's really good to hear. And why do you think the Australian government would give that amount of money to it? Because it seems like, I mean, I know in global terms it's a small amount of money, but it's a substantial amount of money in terms of being able to grow an organisation like Growing with Gratitude, and
Sure.
it feels like it's a real supportive thing from the people that have the power and influence to really help
Yes.
children. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really keen to sort of understand a little bit about that, because if that could happen over here, for example, then
Yeah.
it really could have a massive impact.
Sure, I think it's a really interesting question. It's exactly the question we need to be asking ourselves in the UK. For me, it's why not? When mental health and physical health, they really do go hand in hand, and this has been proven. With the problems we have with the NHS, the burden on the NHS and these things, I feel like how on earth could the government not yet have given this kind of money to a similar project? Because over in Australia, they are a little bit ahead of us with that, and they do seem to have recognized the importance of mental health. They've had various trials. I think Geelong Grammar School, a private school, was the first school to trial something similar to Growing with Gratitude. And I mean, the results have just been absolutely astounding, with children academically doing better, being happier, having a better physical health too. The question for me, the Australian government are further ahead than we are in the UK, but hopefully, we're not too far behind them. I think we're only really just starting to catch up, but hopefully, this is really going to get some momentum very quickly.
Great. And why was it the UK that sort of is the next country on your agenda? Why was it the UK rather than anywhere else?
Sure. Well, of course, I guess the very easy fact that I am originally from the UK,
Yeah.
whilst I'm based over here in Barcelona, I'm now starting to come over to the UK a little bit more with this project. And also because for the very reason that quite recently the government did announce that they would be having this spending, this £300,000, I think it is, but specifically in secondary schools. So whilst they haven't yet talked about funding so much for primary schools, I believe that before the end of this government, they do want to look at primary schools too, but the first tackle in secondary schools. But once again, in spite of the fact that they haven't yet announced any spending in primary schools, we so strongly, strongly feel that children from a very young age could be adopting the skills that could later prevent, mental health disasters and crises, as we're presently seeing in the UK. So whilst we don't yet have that funding, we feel so strongly about it that we're just going to put ourselves out there, survey, see what kind of schools are interested, see who wants to give it a go for free. And hopefully, once a few schools start to see the real benefits, others might follow suit. And we may even, get to persuade somebody within the government. Who knows?
That would be great, wouldn't it? Really would be great.
Yeah, yeah.
So in terms of exactly what's involved, so that they go to the website, they then follow a program, they download worksheets. Exactly what are the practical
Sure,
steps that teachers would need to
sure.
take?
So any practice, so I guess the first thing would be to see if this is something that, is going to be of interest and relevance to your school. And I think it would be the case for all schools. But I guess first of all, it's, getting a head teacher or a deputy or any member of staff who, has, I don't know, 20 minutes of free time to have a look at our program. We're very happy to let someone into the system, for a little time, see if this is something that's interesting for them. If they do feel this is something they'd like to explore further, then either Ash or I are happy to have a chat about it. And from there, we can set up a free trial, so a free 2 week trial. All they would need literally is one laptop, one computer, because whilst we say we're an online program, it doesn't mean that every child needs a computer, far from it. So from our online program, the teacher would have access to the 10 lesson plans per year group and to the Habits of Happiness wheel, which is basically just a wheel that the children spin, 2 or 3 times a
Yeah.
week, where they get to practice for like 5 minutes one of the habits of happiness that they've learned about in the previous class. So from that online program, the teacher has all the downloadable resources, which are just they can make photocopies of. They don't need anything in particular, no special materials, and it's just that, Mark. They'll have the 10-hour lesson plan, and the 10 1 hour lesson
Yeah.
plans, and that's all they need. That with the Habits of Happiness wheel. There are like other additional materials that they can add to that, but that's all pretty optional. And that is all they need. That's all they need to do. Obviously, for a 2 week period, they wouldn't have time to try all of those, but they would have, enough time to get an idea, to get a feel for what it's about and the kind of impact that it can have on the students. So,
Yeah, I mean that
yeah,
that sounds really excellent, and it's the sort of thing that if you're listening as a teacher and you just want to give it a go, and if it makes
yeah,
some kind of impact, some kind of opportunity to be able to then take it to your head, like you said, or your
yes,
deputy, and just say,
yeah,
look, we've
yeah,
we've tried this. It's not cost us any money yet. This is how it can
yeah,
work. These are the kind
yeah,
of things that we're already beginning to see. Then you've
yeah,
already got that opportunity to sell it, and if you've got that enthusiasm and that real kind of knowing, we all know this is what children need.
yeah,
We know this is just a fundamental part of what their understanding needs to be about them as a whole person. That's
yes,
what we're
yeah,
educating. And all the
yeah,
academic stuff are tools that they can then do to fulfill their potential. So
absolutely.
getting on board in that way, it just is probably the most important thing you can possibly do.
Yeah,
And go to
yeah.
that website and really check it out.
Absolutely, Mark. And I mean, I'd just like to add, like, however small we start, it's, that in itself is significant. Even if it's just 1 year group, a couple of year groups, the school has to know that great if they choose to take on the program for the whole school. But if they just want to give it a trial, for 1 year with 1 year group to see how it goes, or a couple of year groups, then that's absolutely fine too. And each year group, we obviously have a different syllabus for each year group. So, this is something that's very cumulative in its effects. So if kids can start like at the age of 5 and learn this, from the age of 5 to 11, wow, that's powerful. But even so, it's never too late. It's absolutely never too late. And I think even the teachers themselves, we've had feedback that the teachers themselves have experienced, some pretty transformative lessons there, and more, emotional awareness and a greater well-being and resilience in a profession which is as stressful and demanding as teaching can be at times. So I think, this is something very beneficial both for students, then parents and families, and teachers, and the whole school environment. I have to say, happiness is something that really is contagious. Well-being is something that's very contagious, and it's sort of, it affects everybody that we come into contact with. So I cannot tell you how much we really do believe in the transformative power of this. And definitely, I think, for the sake of a couple of weeks, giving it a go in your class for free of charge, I don't think there's too much to lose. And I think there's a lot to gain. So I would really urge teachers, if you're interested, please do get in touch, because we'd be more than happy to give you any more information.
That's really brilliant. And the thing that just struck me then was that I had this conversation an episode quite recently, was the fact that the dialogue you have with your children in your class, and also probably more importantly, understanding their story. And it's these kind of conversations, it's talking about these kind of things in life that bring that out. And that's so beneficial in everything that you then learn in school as well, isn't it? So it's really given you a real starting point for those things as well, rather than having to create a full situation. You're actually embedding it in exactly what your school classroom actually will look like.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, it's a brilliant point, Mark. And I just think this initiative, it's so preventative, really. We're taking measures from a very early age, so as to give children, the emotional literacy that life just doesn't necessarily teach them. It's taken me 36 years to be able to put my feelings into words, to be able to express how I'm feeling at any moment, and that is real power, the ability to put your feelings into words, to create a language around your emotions. That really takes away the power of negative emotions when we do experience them, when we do feel them. The kind of negative emotions that kids maybe experience that leads them to play up in class, to behave badly, then to be thrown out of the class, when at that moment the child is manifesting a need to be understood, to be closer to other students, to be closer to the teacher. And what do teachers sometimes do? They sometimes, throw them out of the class, so they're actually excluded at a time when they most need to be understood. And I think the great thing about this program is it's building awareness, it's building emotional awareness, both for the individual, for the students and the teachers. It's creating a very open and honest dialogue in a place where nothing's been said up to this point.
I think that's a great place to finish, because it really does give us an understanding of the power actually about it, rather than we talk about programs and resources, but it's actually the fundamental power about what we're doing, and that's so brilliantly. So thanks so much for chatting to me. Can you just give us the website one more time, just for those people? And
yeah, absolutely. And so the website is www.growingwithgratitude, all one word, growingwithgratitude.com.au for Australia, AU. And as I say, the UK version can be accessed from there very easily.
Fantastic. So thanks very, very much for chatting. It's been really great, and I'm really pleased that the whole thing is growing, and especially becoming international as well. It's such an important thing. And for those of you listening, please just share this podcast with some teachers in your school and some schools around, just so that we can sort of help spread this feeling of positivity, and also feel that we're actually been able to make a difference to every person every day in that smallest kind of way. And I think from there, the rest of education and society will start to take care of itself. It's just knowing these things to begin with.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, for the opportunity to talk about this. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to the Education on Fire podcast. For more information of each episode and to get in touch, go to educationonfire.com. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.